Obviously, as people will be aware, that we've suspended our picketing on Sidgwick site after the tragic events at London Bridge, and out of respect and sympathy with Jack and Saskia's families, and that our pickets have observed a minute's silence along with other people in the city who did that at 11 o'clock. Our rally today is focusing on the issue of pay inequality, and we've got a range of speakers who are going to talk about what that means, not just in terms of issues related directly to inequality, such as the absolutely scandalous gender pay gap that we have at the university, but we're also very pleased to welcome Inez, who's from the Living Wage campaign, who's going to talk about issues faced in terms of low pay, poverty pay, by staff who are not members of UCU but are working for the colleges and for the university. So it's a message of solidarity that we stand against low pay and poverty pay and inequality in pay for whoever that affects. So our first speaker is going to be Paulina Sliwa, who is back specially off maternity leave to come and speak to us, and she's going to be talking about the work that she's going to be talking about the work that we've been doing, and she's been helping to lead through our gender pay gap working group.
Anyway, so communications from RVC have been somewhat elusive since the beginning of this dispute. But from what he has said, the message has been that he would like us to trust that he has our back in national pay negotiations and pensions negotiations, and that he's really committed to his staff. And we should just trust that he will make his voice heard to our advantage. And I have to say, I really don't buy it. And the reason I don't buy it is that if you're curious about the commitment of a VC to his or her staff, you look at the working conditions at their home institution. And I think the working conditions here in Cambridge, they tell a different story. Most starkly when it comes to gender disparities. So the gender pay gap at Cambridge stands at 19.7%, which is a damning figure since the national average is just below 12%. And what's even more damning is that that figure has barely budged in the last 5 years. And to make it budge, it's not going to be enough to just announce some initiative which inevitably bottoms out in a vacuous website. And it's not going to be enough to organize women's financial well-being events, for which I'm regularly invited, where we're empowered to take charge of our own financial futures. You know, it's going to be a matter of putting resources and actual money into the places where it matters. And there it matters in 3 places. So one is academic promotions. And there it's not enough to just top up the sum available for promotions by some number or other. You know, it's going to take structural change to make sure that women are not disadvantaged through the process. At the moment, less than a quarter of Cambridge professors are women, and that is certainly not because of a lack of talent or lack of accomplished women in the Cambridge workforce. So Cambridge lags behind Oxford, Exeter, Manchester, Birkbeck, and lots of other considerably less wealthy institutions in only offering 18 weeks of paid parental leave. All of these other institutions offer 26 weeks. The proposal to bring Cambridge in line with those other institutions has been at HR committee since last January. They've been thinking about it since last. That's a longer gestational period than for an actual human baby. One thing that we're calling RVC on is to make sure that that gets prioritized and that HR committee finally comes to a considered decision on this. And the third place where it matters is affordable nursery provision. So currently, since 2011, the price of workplace nursery places has gone up by 5% or more year by year. Currently, a nursery place in Cambridge's own workplace nursery costs more than £13,000 a year. And perhaps this needs spelling out to a vice-chancellor, but that is not affordable to most of Cambridge University staff. So we need more places, and we need places to be genuinely affordable. So if the VC would like us to trust him that our best interests are in his hands and that he will truly be committed in those negotiations, he better start out by putting his own house in order. Thank you.
So today we are out to ask for a stop of a decade of pay cuts and for an end to the disgraceful pay gaps. Many of them, the gender pay gap, the race pay gap, the migrants pay gap, the disability pay gap. That's too many pay gaps. At the University of Cambridge, thanks to Paulina and everyone who's been involved on the gender pay gap campaign, we know where the gender pay gap is coming from. She talked about the really lack of professors female at the university, but we also know that part of it comes from market supplements. So that's a bonus to the pay to attract and maintain staff, like stars that the university like to say. And the thing is that men receive these market supplements way more than women. And even when women get these market supplements, the amount is way less than for men. So the irony in all of that is if we would have a good pay increase and a good pay, there would be no need for market supplements. And that would solve part of the problem of the gender pay gap. And the last thing I wanted to say, I wanted to keep it short, is that, as you may know, UCAA is now consulting the employers, including our own Vice-Chancellor, to know how they should respond to our demands on pay and pay equality. And so what we want is Stephen Tube to use the great influence of the University of Cambridge to put pressure on the other employers to give us a good offer for fair pay and pay equality. And the email that Stephen Tube sent last time was good, but that was warm words. So basically what we want is action, and we want action now.
As both previous speakers referenced, the communications from the Vice-Chancellor have so far been pretty haphazard. So many of you probably won't have seen the email he sent last Monday. If you haven't, a brief summary is that he said he was on staff's side. He said he was fighting our corner. He said locally he was trying to ameliorate the effects of deteriorating pay across the sector. And so I'm here to talk about the response we've made to that. And first of all, I'd like to say it was pretty difficult to write because there's not a huge amount to which we could respond. This email was yet another emission of hot air from our Vice-Chancellor and from the university as a whole. The certain measures he mentioned more money for promotions. He mentioned he'd been putting pressure on people recently. He'd been fighting our corner. There's just no evidence for this. And on the fundamental questions, he has no answers yet again. So on pensions, he said this was a complicated issue. He said there are lots of parties in this dispute. He said Cambridge is just one of many employers. And again, he's underplayed the influence, the material and symbolic influence that this university has. He said we'd better wait. We'll see what the JEP's second report says. He said nothing about the first report that found that the deficit, which was supposedly a part of USS last year, had actually been invented, was just a figment of someone's imagination. Back in November last year, the university were kind of evangelical about this JEP report. They were very, very happy for the recommendations to be incorporated into future valuations. And now, once those recommendations have been jettisoned by USS, no word at all. It's not us who has to compromise on this, it's USS. They have to start listening to the evidence and start valuing their scheme accordingly. And what do we want from this Vice-Chancellor? We want him to step up. We want him to show that Cambridge accepts the JEP report, that Cambridge is in favour of evidence-based valuation, and that the current system of increased contributions to USS is not good enough for staff. So what did he have to say about pay? Well, it might surprise you, but not very much. Again, Cambridge is one of many employers. This is a sector-wide issue. Again and again, we get this lame excuse. We need to know what he is saying right at this moment to UCEA. How is he pleading our case? How is he making our voices heard? How is he making sure employers across the sector start listening to their staff when they say they just can't take it anymore? Has he said anything publicly? He has not. Has he told us how he's pressing our case? He has not. So the main point of our response to this is to ask him to start putting his money where his mouth is. We need a public statement right away on this issue. We need him to tell us that he has our backs. And we need to tell us how he has our backs too. We need some details.
Why isn't he here? Why isn't he on the picket line with his stuff?
And there's one more thing in his email which we at Cambridge UCU found especially irritating. And this was the way he boasted that he'd been working with UCU on these questions. He'd been working with us on the gender pay gap. He'd been working with us on casualisation. Well, let me tell him, everything we have got as a union, we have got by begging and pleading and fighting and struggling. We have been given nothing. Does he negotiate with us? He ignores us. This union is still forbidden official recognition by the university. If he is serious about working with UCU, then we're here, we're waiting, our door is always open. Come and meet us, talk to us, negotiate with us, recognise us, and help us build a better university.
Academic work is dependent upon a broader network of labour, without which it would not be possible for them to carry out research. It may only be academic employees out on strike, but the issues of low pay, inequality and exploitation affects non-academic staff within colleges as well. Out of 31 colleges, only Queen's and Girton have attained accreditation from the Living Wage Foundation, and through more Freedom of Information requests made this year, we have discovered that only 8 colleges pay the real living wage. Without accreditation, there is no guarantee that any commitment made by these colleges or any college in the future will not be reneged upon. Numerous Cambridge colleges did not publicly disclose the working conditions of their non-academic employees, saying that such transparency posed a risk to their commercial interests, including Robinson and Magdalen, who were not included in this year's Taylor's table. And for a second year in a row, Clare, Churchill and Homerton have come out on top of the worst ranked colleges when it comes to paying the living wage, which is £10 in Cambridge compared to £10.75 in London. Both Clare and Homerton pay more than 12% of their staff less than the previous living wage of £9 per hour, with their lowest paid workers being paid £7.70, and at Keys 2 out of 5 non-academic staff are paid below £9 an hour. Shame. This is exploitation. The university's attitude towards its workers is unfair, unsustainable, and accords no dignity to those who are vital to it. Our demands are simple: pay the real living wage to all staff, academic or not, close the gender and race pay gaps, and gain living wage accreditation. All 31 colleges must ensure safe and respectful working environments for all of their employees, and provide channels for regular feedback about these conditions, in addition to bringing workers in-house rather than outsourcing them. The right of workers to unionize must be recognized, and democratic representation on college committees for non-academic employees and union representatives must be ensured. Colleges are enormously rich institutions. They have a duty to their staff without whom they would not be able to operate, to provide fair pay, fair working conditions, and fair representation.
One of the things I work on is the reproduction of social inequalities in and through higher education. So over the past couple of months, I've been working specifically on gender inequality and how it's reproduced in universities. I wanted to share with you some of the things that other people have told me in this process. Are you sure there is really such a wide disproportion between how much women and men are paid? But surely this must be just an effect of the previous inequalities, and it must be narrowing down really quickly. Surely this is just a reflection of how bad things were 20, 30 or 40, 50 years ago. I mean, Angela Merkel is a woman. Indeed. So is Theresa May, so is Maggie Thatcher. The University of Cambridge currently has a gender pay gap of 19.6%. That is 4.6 over the sector-wide pay gap of around 15%. If it continues narrowing it down at this rate, or rather at this current speed, it will close it in 2069. That's in 50 years' time. So in 50 years' time, I will be 88 years old, so comfortably retired for about 23 years, or maybe not so comfortably if the USS scheme continues in the direction in which it seems to be going, as we just had. But even if all of this were true, the gender pay gap is just the tip of the iceberg floating on, if you'd excuse a slightly pathetic metaphor, the sea of patriarchy that we are surrounded by. And I'd never thought I would say this, but this is the one iceberg that I don't think is melting even nearly quickly enough. So, universities, or the vice chancellors in specific, commitment to promoting gender equality through the revision of the system of promotions is in and of itself neither a lot nor is it anything but cynical in the context in which women are still differently evaluated for the work that they do. So, as we know, and as research has repeatedly shown, women, including women in academia, take on a disproportionate amount of emotional, care, administrative, and organizational labor. This happens in the home as well, and they're also disproportionately penalized when they do not. So they have to abide by an 800 years old standard of gender norms in the context of the University of Cambridge, which means that obviously they're not expected to be there, except perhaps in slightly subservient roles. It is nothing but cynical to ask women to lean in and ask for promotion and ask for raise in the context in which women are not only penalized by being seen as women, but are also disproportionately penalized if they also happen to have a racial, ethnic, or any other identity that diverges from the patriarchal norm. So in that sense, in the context where all of this is the case, the fact that the university has committed to eradicating the gender pay gap is nice, but it's very far from enough. So in addition to taking concrete steps to eradicate the gender pay gap, and pretty please prior to 2069, if anyhow possible, we also need the university to commit to reforming the recognition process in a way that can account for divergent career pathways between women and other people, so that it not only issues related to parental or maternity leave, but also other forms of caring duties, as well as recognize the disproportionate amount of care and emotional labor, including within the university, that women as a rule tend to take on. Until then, telling women to lean in is nothing but a cynical demand for them to perform even more labor in order to get equal recognition. And that's not enough.
My name's Joe. I just want to make a brief kind of contribution from Cambridge Defend Education. But before that, so I'm a student teacher here. And I just want to say how immensely proud I've been to be standing with my tutors on the picket line last week and today. And other university staff, of course. No, it's been amazing, honestly. Just like the kinds of conversations we've been having and the ways that we've been together show us not only another kind of university, but another kind of world. And we can't forget that. We've got to keep feeling that, keep taking it forward. And we can remake this system, and we can win. I really believe we can win. So we'd like to challenge Stephen too to come out and speak to us. You know, it's all about listening, isn't it? If we're going to move forwards together, we need to have a talk or a debate. So we're challenging you, Stephen too. Where are you, Stephen? We're challenging you to come out here 1 p.m. Wednesday. You know, we're going to have a little talk, as long as you like, but we can. If the university is all about free inquiry and democracy and thinking things through, then we can do that together, and maybe we can come up with a resolution to this conflict, you know. We wouldn't want to have to empty chair him. So if you know him, make sure to say, Stephen, just come have a friendly chat with us. It's all good. And that'll be part of the kind of Strike Fest celebration.